Hi everyone, welcome to Make It Change. For this video, I'll be talking about how to create a budget. Um, I think what I'll do is I'll experiment with a tripod and setting up, looking down on a table with a piece of paper and actually work through doing it. But for this video, I'll just be talking through it. And so the first step in creating a budget, I think, is to forgive yourself for not already having one. Um, we have really high expectations for ourselves. We feel like we should be in control of our finances, but if you watched any of the previous videos, you know that at least my working theory is that all we have is fear and avoidance when it comes to our finances. And when you combine that with high expectations, I already feel as though I should have this under control. That leads to a feeling of failure, which leads us to more avoidance. So first, forgive yourself. You don't have a budget. That's just where you are. So all you do, it's not easy, but you take it step by step. It's going to be a process. You're not going to sit down. A lot of people, me included, when I first tried to do it, I thought, okay, cool, I'm going to sit down, and maybe 10 or 20 minutes, I'm going to figure it out. That's not going to happen. That isn't going to work. It's going to be a process because you're going to be thinking about things that you've never really had to think about. And you're going to be as you think through them and as you write them down, you're going to kind of start, it's the very beginning, but you're going to start detaching your emotions from the numbers because you're going to actually understand what the numbers are instead of them being amorphous and undefined and just something you're not doing well at. So, you know, you should sit down, begin with forgiving yourself, have a piece of paper. If paper is your medium, not everyone, likes to do pen and paper. Some people are better with, entering it into a spreadsheet. I'm both ways, but the paper is a little bit easier to just handle, on the fly thinking and just to jot stuff down, at least for me. So, sit down with a piece of paper and then you just begin thinking about what your sources of income are. That's much easier to begin with because you probably know those right off the top of your head. You're either going to have a salary that's the same each month or every 2 weeks, depending on whatever period it is you get paid. Unless you have, you may have a complicated salary situation where you get periodic bonuses, maybe if you're a salesperson, but there's probably some kind of base pay or some kind of lower range of your income that you know is reasonable to use as a base. If you're an hourly person earning a wage, you can just reflect on, the last 3 months or last 6 months of your, bank account statements or your pay stubs and just average them together. Um, and you'll establish what your base income is per month. I recommend doing a monthly budget. Some people work out a yearly budget, and for me, the way I think through things, it's easier for me to model a single month and then expand that out to a year than it is for me to model a year and then try to understand the, you know, divide by 12 aspect of that. It's much easier to multiply up by 12 than divide by 12, just looking at something on a piece of paper. So think about your sources of income. It's going to be, your job, your salary, your wage. Maybe you have a hobby that brings in a variable amount of income. That can be difficult to think about. So, you know, similar to, earning a wage where maybe the hours are variable, I would say since this is your first effort at it, your first go at it, just average out the last 6 months And as you become more familiar with these numbers, you're going to start to kind of think about, oh, okay, how could I actually get a little bit closer to what the truth is, for this number? And, ways to do that will, start occurring to you, like if it's a hobby, and it's based on, I'm thinking about like Twitch streaming, or something like that. Maybe you have some, friends who are also streamers, and, you can kind of talk with them about how it is they estimate, what their income is going to be and this sort of thing. Or if you sell products at a craft fair or something like that. Um, so my recommendation is just average out the last 6 months. And if you want to, you can even just use the lowest income in that 6 months if you want to establish a really low floor, or whatever it is that's going to work for you if your income is variable. So just write down on the piece of paper what your sources of income are and how much those are per month. And maybe you're an older person, and maybe you have a few different sources of income. Maybe you have Social Security, and then maybe you are drawing from your 401k. Maybe you even have required minimum distributions if you're over 70. Um, Write those down and then just add them up, and then you know how much your income is per month. Then the thing that's probably going to feel a little bit harder to do, and that it might take a few passes at. I don't recommend sitting down and grilling yourself and making this another negative feeling situation for yourself. Do it, sit down with it, do it, do as much as you can, and then set it aside. And then maybe, depending on what kind of person you are, maybe then you just kind of come back to it and you make more progress. Or maybe something, occurs to you, jogs loose in your mind, and then, you'll come back over and write down one more line, maybe 2 days later or something like that. However it is that you work, um, start to think through what your expenses are. And the probably easiest way to do it is to think through your priorities, and things that are important to you and important and needed in your life. So, a fairly easy prioritization list is how much do your living arrangements cost? If you're, renting an apartment, or if you have a mortgage, um, how much is that? How much is it to keep a roof over your head? And then break down your utility costs, because within that place that you live, there are going to be costs. Maybe you pay for the water, or maybe you don't if it's an apartment. Maybe you chip in on the electricity, or maybe you're wholly responsible for paying the electricity. Maybe you have a gas bill, or maybe you don't. Maybe you have an internet bill. Maybe you have a cable bill. I would recommend separating out the cable charge, the cable television charge, from the cable internet charge, so that you can just scrutinize those separately, because those are two separate things that you can adjust if you decide that you want to. Then, kind of start thinking through other variable expenses that you might have per month. These are things that are usually just us living our lives. So, they're difficult to account for. For that, I would recommend looking through your credit card statements, and then, just kind of, I don't recommend creating a lot of little categories. That's a way to exhaust yourself and to turn this very beginning exercise. You haven't even created a budget yet. You're just establishing what your costs are. Um, if you make it really uncomfortable for yourself, where every single little thing has to be its own category, like, this is how much money I spend on coffee, and this is how much money I spend on shoes, and this is how much money I spend on going to the movies. That's a little too detailed. You might need to get down to that. You may want to, but for this first pass, just keep it as a big category, a big bucket. So I would recommend looking at your credit card statement and just kind of summarizing all of it, as review it and actually make sure that these are other unaccounted for just costs of living your life in a way that's comfortable to you if you're living a comfortable life for yourself. And then just write that number down in your budget as just a big, vague, general category cost of living. And then you may have other costs. You might pay for your medical care separately from your income, depending on just what your situation is. Write down all of those. And then I recommend putting it aside. Um, you'll kind of know how long to set it aside. It might be a day if you are feeling pretty comfortable with it. It might be a week. It could be longer. Probably shouldn't be too much longer than that, though. And what you're really kind of looking for is your comfort level to give enough time so that your subconscious mind can surface any other things that should be written down either as income or as expenses. Um, and, after a certain amount of time has gone by, generally you'll have a feeling that, yeah, I'm pretty confident that I've accounted for the, certainly major things and probably everything at that point if you've, gotten that feeling. So then what you do is you now understand what your income is versus what your expenses are. And that can be scary all on its own because maybe you see that, oh, okay, my expenses are larger than my income. Well, that's a danger. That isn't good. That isn't where you want to be. And that's one of the reasons that you do this thing and you write these numbers down, as much fear as there might be around that. Because once you see the numbers, once you understand what money is going where, then you can begin imagining how to make changes. So um, that's how to begin making a budget. You just catalog your income and your expenses, and then those become your building blocks to actually build a budget. All right, so I'm going to end this here. And I'll say like and subscribe, and you'll get more videos of how to understand your finances and how to actually build a budget. Maybe I'll experiment and try writing it down as an example, work through an example budget for everybody. And I'll say happy personal finances to you, and make some changes, try some different things. All right, bye.